All right, let's do some. Let's do some fun stuff.
Within 10 days, you and your family will be killed. Now, in Montgomery, our home was bombed twice. Today, we still confront threats through telephone calls and through the mail.
It's 1964, and a package has just been sent to Martin Luther King Jr.'s house in Atlanta, Georgia. The package contains reels of tape, and on that tape, there's blackmail, as well as this one-page letter. The letter,
"'Cause you are black and you are male." I'm sorry. I can't. Every time I hear the word blackmail, I think of Cowboy Bebop, Netflix live action. There's not a moment that literally fucking leaves my mind. Stop the stream. I can't. I'm sorry. Don't make me play the video. Don't make me play the fucking video. Okay, well, now you're forcing me to play the video. I'm sorry.
I was thinking less along the lines of cash, more along the lines of dinner. Me, you, bottle of Chianti, 2 bottles if we're feeling dangerous.
Sounds to me like blackmail.
You're damn right it is, because, Jet, you are black and you are male.
The trumpet in the background makes it so much better. You are black and you are male.
Sounds to me like blackmail.
You're damn right it is, because, Jet, you are black and you are male.
Oh.
is written in the voice of one of King's supporters. It's riddled with typos and corrections. And the letter tells King that he should, quote, look into his heart, because he is, quote, a complete fraud, a great liability to black people. It refers to the tapes that are in this package, which is an audio.
You know what's really funny about this? This is the type the CIA used to fucking do with dudes on payroll. Now dumbass like debate lord fans do it for free to anyone that they ostensibly see as like a leftist. Doesn't that sound exactly like a fucking concerned chatter? Like literally the dude I just banned half an hour ago. It's like, hey man, I'm really concerned because I feel like you're bad for the left. I'm a leftist and I actually hate Hasan because he is actually terrible for the cause. Verbatim. Obviously, like my impact is nothing in comparison to MLK. I'm not comparing myself in that situation. I'm saying that like nowadays, the impact of the people that think are doing like important work for the left is softened. Okay. And also beyond that, the people doing the counter narratives are also fucking on Reddit doing it for free.
Supercut of evidence showing King committing adulterous acts, sexual encounters with his girlfriends and mistresses. The letter calls him a, quote, dissolute, abnormal, moral imbecile, abnormal animal, a beast. What incredible evilness. Satan could not do more. The letter tells King that his end is approaching and that he has just one thing left to do. And he knows what it is. He has 34 days in which to do it. This letter, insinuating that Martin Luther King Jr. should end his own life, was not sent by a disenchanted follower, and it was not typical hate mail. This letter was sent by some of the most powerful men in the United States, the top leaders of the FBI.
And of course, I received numerous threatening letters. You and your family will be killed.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee.
More than half of Americans don't buy the official account that a lone racist gunman was behind the death of Martin Luther King on that day in Memphis in the late 1960s. That number is more like 88% for Black Americans. Those who don't believe it include the ones that were standing next to him when it happened. They include his family. An exhaustive congressional investigation found that King's murder was, quote, likely a conspiracy. But there's actually a lot more to the story than who pulled the trigger. And thanks to recently declassified documents, thousands of them that we've been going through, we can now shed a light on the FBI in the 1960s, what they were up to, and what that teaches us about who really killed Martin Luther King. Before we move on, a quick note from our sponsor. Sponsors allow us to do these deep dives where we spend months and months looking at FBI documents. So thank you Incogni for sponsoring today's video. We live in a world that is full of junk mail and spam calls and all kinds of predatory stuff on the internet. This world is made possible by the shadowy industry of data brokers that try to collect all of your information, where you live, what you like to do on the internet, how old you are, and sell that information on an open market. Incogni is your way out of this system. You sign up for Incogni and you give them permission to go out and request on your behalf that you be taken off the data broker list. There are hundreds and hundreds of these lists that our names are on. And with Incogni, you can start the process of getting yourself off these lists. And then Incogni immediately starts sending out a bunch of requests to take me off these lists. And I can see on my dashboard how many requests they've sent out. It blew my mind. It's literally hundreds. And then they keep you updated on all of the progress that they're making to take you off these lists. Sometimes they have to request multiple times and work through the request. You don't have to worry about any of it. Incogni does this for you. I'm learning that I'm not just on like corporate email lists, but now I'm on like people search lists, that my data and browsing history could be used to jack up my
here's
Incogni. You'll get a big discount, like 60% off when you sign up using the link. Thank you Incogni for sponsoring today's video, for supporting our journalism. And with that, let's keep going on this story about MLK. So,
you will regret ethical reacting to this? No, I won't.
Late 1960s.
I love Johnny Harris. I will never regret ethical reacting to Johnny Harris. He's my fave. Johnny Harris is my problematic fave, okay? My man said he's like investigating the MLK assassination conspiracy. Like my favorite thing is when he just like describes stuff that's like pretty basic, but he describes it like the story becomes his fact-finding journey more so than the subject matter that he's discussing. His style is his style is undefeated. Okay, I love him. He'll be like, we did some investigation, and then it'll be him like opening up a dusty ass dictionary and finding the word conspiracy in the dictionary, and he's like, a conspiracy is when two parties get together to conspire to do a crime. It's fucking awesome.
America, there was a secret war going on between these two men. One of them wielded the immense opaque power of the United States' Federal Bureau of Investigations. The other man belonged to America's long oppressed minority and fought this war using the weapons of compelling words and a deep philosophical commitment to non-violent protest.
My feeling is that the vast majority of Negroes in the United States believe in nonviolence as a basic tactic for social change. Nonviolence. The nonviolence is really the only way that we can follow.
That if every Negro in the United States turns against nonviolence, I'm going to stand up as a lone voice and say this is the wrong way.
In 1960s America, nonviolence turned out to be an incredibly powerful tool for waging this struggle. because it always resulted in the same thing, the inevitable crackdown of excessive violence by law enforcement and counter-protesters. And when that was then covered and shown to the general population, it was so starkly clear who was right and who was wrong in the situation.
Oh my God. What the fuck is he saying? Dude, 66% of the public thought that MLK was a bad guy at the time of his assassination. And nobody saw the nonviolent protests and the police brutality that came after it as like a one-sided, well, they did see it as a one-sided affair, just not in the way that Johnny Harris is claiming. This is the same liberal version of like whitewashing the civil rights movement. It's so funny.
Strategy in terms of changing the hearts and minds of America. Watching young boys and girls and teenagers and adults be beaten, posed, shot, murdered, maimed for simply wanting to exercise their rights as citizens. These images were very powerful.
You've got to keep the white and the black separate.
A visual spectacle that represented what Black Americans knew all too well was how they were treated by the American system. But now it was just public.
What the fuck are they talking about?
King led 40,000 to protest segregated buses for over a year, resulting in the desegregation of public buses in Montgomery, Alabama. He went to the most segregated city in America to lead sit-ins in segregated restaurants and lunch counters. Protesters would peacefully kneel in churches and libraries. They marched on City Hall. And King would always get up with his powerful, stirring words to remind these protesters about the importance of their core philosophy.
We go back to the buses. Let us be loving enough to turn an enemy into a friend. Nonviolent protest against injustices and indignities experienced.
That the idea that you were going to bludgeon your enemies or destroy your enemies into some form of solidarity where it wouldn't just be permanently armed camps, he thought was an illusion. Persistent illusion that we constantly make. That's one of the objections about militarism, that it's based on a fantasy.
King and many of these protesters were arrested. From jail, King wrote a letter about why he was leading these demonstrations in Birmingham. August 1963 letter.
Good thing there wasn't any other more radical activists at the time that had radically different approaches to the same subject matter that even this guy may have hypothetically worked with, MLK, I mean, you know. Like it was just, it was MLK, and the only thing he said was just don't be violent. This is literally the liberal version of what conservatives do when they're like, MLK, famous for saying, I have a dream. Don't yell at white people. This is the liberal version of that. It's just like Republicans will always be like, yeah, remember when he said, I have a dream that white people and black people are equal, which means like, shut the fuck up about racism. That's what his dream was. This is the liberal version of that, which is like, yeah, MLK, famous for only saying, please don't do anything violent. Actually, being violent is just as bad as being the police. Don't look into it any further. That's the only thing I've said, and nothing else.
From Birmingham jail. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. And that now was their time, for they had, quote, waited for more than 340 years for their God-given constitutional rights. This is the only way to change what was the status quo in America, where vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers, hate-filled policemen curse, kick.
There's a much more important part in that letter. I hope he'll get to that. Like a much more important part of that letter. That's crazy. If he doesn't talk about how he has grown disillusioned with the white moderate, I'm going to lose my mind. That is the whole letter. The entire letter is about shitting on the white moderate who puts a timeline on another man's justice. Another man's yearning for freedom. Are you fucking kidding me? That's the whole point of the letter. Bro is clip chimping MLK. He's going to get to it. I know he's going to get to it.
And brutalize and even kill your black brothers and sisters. And after trying many different ways of addressing this, nonviolent direct action would build creative tension in the society. It would dramatize these issues so that they could no longer be ignored. This was his strategy for change and equality for his people, and it was working. Lunch counters, restrooms.
I'm sorry, what? Dude, what the fuck? Dude, this is literally not as severe, but almost as severe as like conservatives clip chimping MLK. What the fuck? You don't know MLK like John, bro, pipe down. No, he did some deep investigations in this video.
Rooms and drinking fountains were desegregated across Birmingham. And as King predicted,
check my last mod, auto mod too spicy. The price that America must pay for the continued oppression of the black man and other minority groups is the price of its own destruction. They were throwing rocks at Ruby Bridges when she was like 6, like 10 years before MLK's assassination. What he's saying is objectively not true of the American mindset in the 60s. Yeah. Johnny Harris has more Emmys than Better Call Saul. Why do you have to remind me of 2 grave mistakes committed by this institution? It's like, what is this? Urban Guerrillas by Cuck Philosophy. The Decade of Left-Wing Terrorism. That's crazy, man. I can't believe people are... Yeah, MLK had a 66% disapproval rating at the time of his assassination, by the way, by the end of it.
the spectacle of peaceful protesters being violently cracked down on spread across the country, elevating the movement to an unambiguous moral high ground that couldn't be put down by force and arrests and violence by law enforcement.
Now and will continue to carry on our mass protest.
What the fuck's he talking about? Unambiguous moral high ground? Dude, nobody thought that at the time. What the fuck's he saying? Do people really think if you just watch enough black people get their heads beat in, you stop being racist? Yo, this is... Okay, at first I was like, okay, this is liberal revisionism, but this is borderline, this is ahistorical. What he's describing, it did not happen. It demonstrably did not happen. I don't understand why he's saying these things that did not fucking happen. The notion that liberals were like, oh, damn, I can't believe black people are getting their fucking heads bashed in by the cops. I'm reconsidering my opinion on what we must do with this whole civil rights thing is literally identified in the letter for Birmingham jail, the part that he did not describe. That's crazy. Like, the part of the letter that he clip-chimped out is the part where MLK is clearly talking about the white moderate, unironically looking at bashed in black protesters engaging in an act of civil disobedience and going, is the right time? Is this the right time right now? What the fuck do you mean, bro? Literally, this is like a matter of historical record, okay? He was imprisoned as a participant in nonviolent demonstrations against segregation, and he wrote this letter. The letter that he actually highlighted parts from about nonviolence features this very important part. I must make two honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I've almost reached a regrettable conclusion that the black man's great stumbling block in the stride towards freedom is not the white citizens counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time, and who constantly advises the black man to wait until a more convenient season. That part is the most important part of this letter. It summarizes the anger and the resentment that he has. It summarizes the reasons for why he feels anger towards the white moderate. It quite literally goes against the point that Johnny Harris is trying to cultivate here, a point that is objectively ahistorical, okay? A falsehood. The notion that Americans saw black people get their fucking skulls bashed and turned around and said, yeah, we got to fix the civil rights shit, is a falsehood. That is not how this happened at all. It is shocking that Johnny Harris cut this video without mentioning and going out of his way, really, to mention this part, especially because he did show the letter from Birmingham jail. Because this part of the letter from Birmingham jail quite literally disproves his liberal, revisionist, and dare I say, ahistorical approach to the subject matter that black people protested nonviolently, and therefore that's the reason why, they got civil rights. No fucking shot. Here we go. Americans see Martin Luther King Jr. as a hero now, but that wasn't the case during his lifetime. Martin Luther King was a civil rights leader and an American hero. Almost every American adult, 95%, believes he was an important figure in U.S. history. Okay? During the 1960s, he was very divisive. The last Gallup poll to ask about his popularity during his lifetime, taken in 1966, found his unfavorable rating was 63%. King's highly negative rating came when he had turned his attention from Southern de jure segregation towards de facto segregation in northern cities. But even before then, King was far from a universally liked person. In the middle of 1964, when Congress was in the midst of passing many landmark civil rights laws, King's favorable rating was just 44%. His unfavorable rating was basically equal at 38%. It was not, thank you, yes, it wasn't white pity that led to the success of the civil rights movement, but black activist persistence. And it was black activists that persisted beyond MLK's methods as well, for the record. Sometimes violent methods. God damn, that's such a silly fucking video to make. This is such like 9 minutes of fucking gobbledygook, okay? 9 minutes of just like made up fart sounds, basically. What the fuck? It's like objectively teaching people a falsehood. That's what frustrates me, okay? Because this is objectively wrong. What he's describing isn't just like, oh, I'm taking the parts of MLK that I care about. This is unironically ahistorical. You are educating your audience on falsehoods. Yes, I still love him, okay? Johnny Harris is still my problematic fave. I don't care. Shut up.
But Martin Luther King was challenging.
Yeah, by the way, the real reason for his unpopularity wasn't because of the de facto segregation or de jure segregation. It was actually the opposition of the Vietnam War. for the record. This chatter is also correct. That played a massive role. That played a massive, massive role.
An old, entrenched system. And when you disrupt a system like that, you create enemies.
Either you give the Negro his God-given rights and his freedom, or you face the fact of continual social disruption and social chaos.
His enemies included those that you would imagine, like the Ku Klux Klan, whose leaders allied with local police in the South and who stated that killing MLK would eliminate all racial problems in the South. You also had pro-segregation groups like the White Citizens Council, who tried to convince the federal government that King's growing movement had communist connections. But it wasn't just these overtly bigoted groups. His enemies also included business owners, real estate developers, landlords, employers.
It did, by the way. It's just funny that, I mean, it did. But it is also very funny that, like, that was back then a major way to, like, stamp out any kind of protest. And it still is. It still is.
All of whom benefited from the status quo. Discrimination in hiring practices, housing, and mortgages. Then, of course, there was a whole bunch of lawmakers and governors. Most of them from the South, almost all of them from the South. But among King's enemies was a Department of Justice agency that was powerful, whose job it was to protect Americans and to enforce the laws of the country.
J. Edgar Hoover served as the agency's director. The FBI building houses the Bureau's Washington headquarters.
That's a dramatic way. That's quite a phenomenal way to describe what the FBI does. Yeah, protect Americans from what? Black people? Yeah, the FBI protecting Americans from, you know, desegregation and like labor rights. That's crazy. This is a crazy fucking video, man. Actually, what the hell's going on here? The dangers, yeah, protecting Americans from the dangers of sharing a neighborhood with black people. Exactly. The dangers of having your white child go to school with a black child.
So remember, it's the 1960s, it's the Cold War. There's an obsession with finding communist sympathizers, anyone who is sympathetic to our big enemy, the Soviet Union. And the director of the FBI at the time was named J. Edgar Hoover. He would be the director of the FBI for like decades. So as King's movement grew, Hoover became suspicious that the movement wasn't a grassroots rising up for equality and racial justice, but rather a communist plot to sow division in American society. So it's 1963, Martin Luther King and his followers are planning this massive march in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, if J. Edgar Hoover wasn't simply mistaken, you know, if he knew that it was just about racial equality, I'm sure he wouldn't have come after Martin Luther King like that. What do you mean? He did genuinely think he was a fucking communist. He thought desegregation is communist nonsense. Why is it so hard for Americans to believe that, like, people in institutional power, people with institutional power and control were just straight up fucking, like, rapist, reactionary, racist fascists? Why is that so hard to understand? Ask a liberal about Washington, George Washington having fucking slaves and watch their mind melt. They're like, what? What? Whoa. What? It takes them like 0.3 seconds to be like, well, slavery was totally permissible back then. It's like, no, it wasn't. And definitely not to the slaves. They were human. What do you think they thought about the debate at the time? You think they were like, oh, well, at least master is debating our existence, you know? Man, thank God for having such a woke master. That's what they were saying, you think? It's like so funny that this is the attitude. It's like, just say it, dude. J. Edgar Hoover was a closeted gay man, or maybe trans, I don't know, but he was definitely a closeted queer man who was also simultaneously a massive racist. He was a fascist.
DC. And Hoover tasks his head of domestic intelligence, William Sullivan, to go out and investigate how much influence the Communist Party has over this movement. And
This is the funny thing. What he doesn't understand is that, one, they did legitimately think that it was communist infiltrated. Okay. And two, it was competing interests at that point. What do Americans hate more? What do Americans in a position of power hate more? Communism or black people? It was basically like competing. So why not both? Let's just say both. That's what it was. The whole goal was to just disparage the movement by being like, yeah. No, it's actually communists that want black people to have equality. It's so odd. How dare you disrespect the Quantico cyclone? Jesus Christ. The Quantico cyclone. What that tongue do, J. Edgar? Just writing prose to MLK. Anyway, Jesus Christ. Yeah, move over, Duluth Dyson. J. Edgar is here to serve you the top of the hour ad break. This is akin to a CIA whitewashing video. Top of the hour secret operations. Okay, well, I already served the top of the hour ad break, so you got. Sailcat, thank you for the 521 gift of subs. Also, I just want to point out that there's nothing wrong with communist infiltration. Many of our beloved figures that have also been whitewashed, revolutionary black liberation movement leaders, were all out and about communists. You never hear about it, though. Martin Luther King was a fucking socialist. You never hear about that, though, either. So, like, technically, they're not wrong when they're like, these guys are infiltrated by the commies. Yeah, they were.
5 days before the March on Washington, Sullivan delivers this report. The report concludes that even though the Soviet Union had spent tremendous sums of money and time and issued lots of propaganda to try to infiltrate this movement, that in fact there was, quote, no known substantial implementation of communism within King's movement. The movement was about racial inequality in America, a real pressing issue. Communism had nothing to offer and nothing to do with it, says this report that was delivered to Hoover 5 days before the March on Washington. But you can see right here, Hoover didn't like it. You can see right here at the bottom of the memo, this is Hoover's handwriting in this declassified document. It's kind of an angry moment. Communism's influence on King isn't infinitesimal, as Sullivan's report had concluded. Sullivan says that Hoover was so mad about this that he stopped talking to Sullivan for months. Sullivan had to, quote, change our ways or we would all be out on the streets, give Hoover what he wanted, or risk the consequences. And what Hoover wanted was King to be tied to communism so that he would have an excuse.
Like, for the record, just so people understand, there were ideological socialists, Marxists, open communists in every aspect of the civil rights movement. What they're looking for here is infiltration from the USSR, which they did not find conclusive evidence for. They're commies in the same way that dumb fucks call me a commie, okay? They were, and they definitely were actually the same level of socialist that I am, both in practice and in theory. The only difference is some of them got whitewashed post-mortem and are now, in order to be celebrated as a hero, they had to be whitewashed. MLK being one of the more prominent examples. But that doesn't change the reality that, like, they were still foundationally invested ideologically in socialism.
Used to spy on him.
99% of people, unfortunately, they don't go to their boss and say, you are a horrible affront to human decency. I will quit this job rather than carry out your directive. They go and they do their job. They say, oh yeah, you were right, boss.
And soon, the FBI would give him exactly what he wanted.
They called it the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. In the lead, Martin Luther King.
Today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps.
Determination that the American society shall have no rest until it is.
Why did the black academics that he has on this video saying that, like, the FBI guy was just following orders? What is happening here? What the fuck is going on? Actually. Yeah, dude, the FBI guys were just simply following orders. That's why they were like, oh, I guess if J. Edgar Hoover says so. Like, they weren't personally fucking invested in the project of dismantling any kind of black liberation movement. What the fuck is happening here?
A society of free men, whatever their color.
Where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
2 days after the March on Washington, Sullivan begins his repentance process by delivering this memo from W.C. Sullivan, August 30th, 1963. Sullivan, who again just produced this big report saying that King had nothing to do with communism, has changed his tune just a few days later. Turns out that the Communist Party does wield substantial influence over black people in America, and that in light of King's powerful demagogic speech, oh, and by the way, the demagogic speech he's talking about is this one.
I have a dream.
King now stands head and shoulders over all other black leaders in the country, that we must mark him now as the most dangerous black person in the nation from the standpoint of communism, race, and national security. The plan would be, according to Sullivan, to completely discredit him, to, quote, take him off his pedestal. The thing is, they were kind of stuck. They didn't have a great plan for putting down this movement. King had achieved the moral high ground, and so they needed to fight morality with morality.
This is so funny. Dude, what the fuck? There's like 100 different things that both the FBI and the CIA were engaging in, like COINTELPRO and numerous other infiltration operations. Like, what is happening? No, man. They tried every avenue, including being like, he's a communist. Except the difference is that, like, the difference, of course, is that, like, I think Johnny agrees with the scourge of communism. So he's not saying that it was like, he's just saying like, oh, no, don't worry. Like, MLK wasn't a communist. Don't worry, guys. He wasn't a gross communist. Yeah, J. Edgar Hoover was based on that front. The J. Edgar Hoover FBI lost the moral high ground.
They could undermine him and his moral philosophy. Then just maybe they could stop his movement, so that the African American community would be, quote, left without a national leader to steer them in the proper direction. So Hoover and his agents cook up some thin evidence that tie.
No, man. No. No, the reason why they did that is the same exact fucking reason why liberals do this shit all the time still. He's a hypocrite. They did this to Bernie. People who have a genuine distaste for any kind of radical change, any kind of progress, that will truly uplift the material conditions of many will do anything and everything they can to tarnish the reputation of the person who's advocating for it, because they hate that he's advocating for those things, because he's going to wake up other people. And if enough people wake up, they're going to demand change themselves. Now, you might either hate the notion of change, or you might genuinely despise what happens when this change occurs because you don't want to live around black people or whatever the fuck, right? But ultimately, that is what happens. They're just doing what they haven't ever stopped doing, really. The whole principle behind him being called a communist was also this. It's literally about trying to destroy the reputation of a person by hitting every fucking avenue they can. They're like, oh, you're a hypocrite. Oh, you're seen as a morally, you're seen as like a moral being. Well, guess what? We're saying that you fucked people. Like, we're saying that you had sex. Yeah. You're a hypocrite, by the way. Reverent, and wants to advocate as a reverend for social change, except he's fucked.
Martin Luther King to communism, and they get approval from the Attorney General to spy on King. But what they don't tell the Attorney General is that they're not actually looking for communism. There is no communism here, and they know that. What they're looking for is whatever they can get to take him off his pedestal. Okay, what we are looking at here is a list of every wiretap and bug that was put on Martin Luther King. Side note, whenever I see these big blocks of...
Yeah, bro, FBI was hate watching MLK, okay? They were pocket watching, they were hate watching my man, they couldn't find anything, so they were like, hey man, you fucked. Please kill yourself.
Redacted text. I just have to know, like, what could have been so juicy that they had to black it out? Like, we're already looking at, like, the sins of the FBI, and there was something even more secret that we just will never see. Too bad. We're looking at wiretaps, which is basically the ability to listen in on phone conversations at a variety of locations. There's his home in Georgia, and then there's a couple hotels in California. There's a home in New York City, and then there's a bunch of microphones. Microphone, or bug, is just when the FBI trespasses into someone's space and puts a microphone that then records everything that happens in that space. So you see them doing this at the Willard Hotel here in Washington, D.C., hotels in California and Hawaii, hotels in New York City. So the main tactic here was to follow MLK as he traveled around the country and to bug and tap his hotel and telephone and spy on everything he said, every person he talked to. Here in the middle of all of these memos, you have this handwritten note to the director saying, obviously, these are particularly delicate surveillances. We should be very cautious in terms of non-FBI people who may from time to time necessarily be involved in some aspect of installation. Like, we gotta really keep this under wraps because it is totally...
Genuinely confused what the hell y'all's problem with Johnny Boy is? What exactly is he saying that's wrong? What are you talking about? Were you not here for the past, like, half an hour? He literally just, he said objectively wrong things. Like, I'm not even talking about like liberalism, law, whatever. Like, he said objectively wrong things. Like, people actually decided that black people had the moral high ground during the civil rights movement. Like, that's not correct at all. That is ahistorical. At the time of his death, he had a 66% disapproval rating. It's just a complete falsehood. The civil rights movement did not find success because white people were like, oh man, I can't believe how much like these cops are beating the shit out of black people. Here's some sympathy. Now we can do some legislation. That's wrong. And a part of why that's so wrong is, I think, the particularly egregious offense that he committed, which was clip chimping MLK. He used his letter from Birmingham jail, where Martin Luther King is literally talking about how disillusioned he has become with the white moderate, so much so that he thinks white liberal moderates who say, now is not the time, or I don't like your methods of protest, are a bigger They are a bigger hurdle to finding any kind of emancipation than a Klansman. That is... What the fuck? What is happening? Sad chatter, are you fucking stupid? Hi, Hasi. I don't know anything. Just curious. Please don't be mad. I'm sorry. You guys post revisionist nonsense like this? You guys post revisionist nonsense like this, and then you're shocked that people are, you know, people are always like, Hasan, you're yelling at people all the time. Okay? This is pure revisionism. No chatter is like, please don't be mad. I'm sorry. They don't look like a cute rat. Just curious chatters are actual rats without the fucking cute bow.
Not okay what we're doing. In short, what they created was, quote, the most complete surveillance imaginable. Unsurprisingly, even after all of this spying, they didn't find communism. There was no communism here. But what they did find is exactly what they needed to, quote, take him off his pedestal. They found sex tapes. These FBI documents that were declassified a few years ago contain the summaries of what the FBI agents say that they heard on these tapes. We don't have the actual tapes yet. And they paint a picture of Dr. King as a womanizer with girlfriends and prostitutes in Las Vegas, New York, Washington, D.C. These memos say that King would get excessively drunk and sleep with women while using, quote, the vilest language imaginable, excessive consumption of alcohol, which served only as a backdrop.
My fucking goat.
Drop to the acts of degeneracy and depravity, many of which committed in a communal atmosphere. I mean, it's a lot of graphic descriptions, some of which don't shine a good light on Dr. King. Running naked, drunk, white prostitutes up and down the hall.
Yeah, my king, dude. What do you mean? Oh my God. Oh, he's a milkman. Like, oh, shut the fuck up. That's the king, okay? Respect. He was laying down the fucking law, dude, okay? He's putting the fucking hammer down. Don't even come at him. You come at the king, you best not miss. Yeah. Yeah, he did. He had a fucking dream, and he was fulfilling it. How about that?
Halls of a hotel in Las Vegas.
They saw his alleged infidelity as exactly the kind of deviance that would allow them to stigmatize the broader Black community, to undermine King's leadership, put his life in turmoil, make him unable to do this job, and to diminish his standing among the broader public.
This surveillance, which again was supposed to be about communism connections, was used to gather a whole swath of ammunition for this war, where Hoover and Sullivan were trying to knock King off of his moral pedestal, to undermine the morality that made King's movement so powerful and unstoppable.
It's so funny. It's just like irrelevant nonsense. Oh, you're making a valid point about segregation? Well, guess what? We think you've had sex with white prostitutes. Please kill yourself. It's like, bro, that is not the point here. Also, technically, he wants to fucking eviscerate miscegenation. I mean, not eviscerate miscegenation, sorry. Eviscerate anti-miscegenation laws. So, like, he's literally putting into practice what he is advocating for. Fuck you mean? It's like dumb motherfuckers being like, Hasan, you're fucking fake commie. You're a fake commie. After all, you have a business. And it's like, yeah, it's a cooperative, dumb fuck. I'm putting into practice what I preach. Yeah, Hasan, you went to a legal brothel at the age of 19. Yeah, I did. I'm an advocate for sex work.
But wait, really quick, we can't really move on before we talk about how to think about this evidence. And we struggle with this a lot. We talk to...
All I'm saying is, have you seen Sydney Sweeney? Have you seen Sydney Sweeney? There it is. That's it. That's it. It's like crazy. What do you mean? Like, let's say there's a Sydney Sweeney type situation, whatever the Sydney Sweeney is of like the 60s. Like, what are you going to do? Be like, oh, I'm sorry. No sex for me, please. No, that's not happening. Wokeism defeated.
A lot of different people with different views on how they interpret this. And here's my take. Okay, these documents.
Yeah. Sorry, no pussy for me, please. I'm a socialist. Go fuck out of here.
In most stories that I do would be rock solid. This is FBI.
I think I remember saying Cutie said that she doesn't own a part of Fear End. Is that true? No, that is objectively not true. How come Austin and Cutie don't own it? Did they not want to? No, they do. What the fuck are you talking about? She must have misspoke. You fucking listened to what you misunderstood what the fuck she was saying. She said she didn't sign any legal papers. Yeah, I mean, but she still owns it. The fuck? Dude, that's crazy, bro. Not only did you fucking literally misunderstand, but then you came in here and were like, how come she's not an owner? Please pull up the Maoist guy tweeting about how a true Maoist, you have to be celibate.
AI intelligence declassified.
Bro, this is what I mean. 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 It's like, I don't even need, there's no need for the FBI, okay? There's not even need for haters, really. I have my own fucking parasocial random chatters that are like 20-month subscribers that are like, guess what, dude? Don't know about that. Yeah, look, your community is your biggest shooters, low key, 100%. Yeah, we got the Federal Bureau of Incels in here, dude.
And usually these analysts are reporting dispassionate, objective evidence that we can use. The problem here is that I know too much about the context surrounding how this intelligence was gathered and the motive for doing so. Future investigations would clearly state that the FBI was riddled with racism and that it was a bunch of white agents all jockeying for the approval of their leader, J. Edgar Hoover, a man who we know now in black and white we have seen was willing to ignore analysis and intelligence that contradicted his own personal views.
That's crazy, man. I mean, that's crazy. I can't believe he did that. That's crazy because he's a good guy otherwise. Yo, J. Edgar. Good guy overall. Definitely consistent. A moral guy. What do you mean, man? He's not a good person. He's a racist. It is known that he is a racist. This is not contradictory to his own personal opinion. He was like, I'm a racist. I think this MLK guy is uppity and I want to make sure he kills himself because I'm scared of desegregation. That's it. That's literally the whole point behind the FBI's activities at the time. It's not just J. Edgar Hoover. It's an entire institution designed around this principle. What the fuck? It is literally the most consistent position for the FBI. The whole like, well, is he a communist? Is he not a communist? All seasoning, okay? Also, it comes with this like weird secondary proposition from Johnny Boy that like if he was really a communist, like if he was like collaborating with like outspoken communist that somehow it would be fine that J. Edgar Hoover was like trying to find blackmail. Like, oh, we phone tapped him and we found out that he is actually fucking, I don't know, reading the Communist Manifesto or something to his Snow Bunny lovers. So it's fine. It's fair. The investigation was fair and balanced. Like what? Who gives a fuck? What do you mean?
And he was willing to drag the entire Bureau along with his theories. Disagree.
That is the whole point. What? What? What are you saying? Bro, does Johnny Harris do investigations about like the FBI one essay at a time? Like, does he not know what the FBI has done before, after, during the same time frame? What the fuck is he doing? He just said J. Edgar Hoover was the bad apple in the FBI, dragging the rest of the FBI along on this thing where they were like, yeah, dude, this is literally, this would be akin to being like, Adolf Hitler was the bad apple, okay? They investigated whether the Jews were actually involved with communism, found out that some Jews were actually, as a matter of fact, trade unionists and communists themselves, you know, and, you got to put those guys in concentration camps, obviously, but Adolf Hitler then took it one step further. Okay, there were capitalist Jews that he also locked up in concentration camps, and then he dragged the rest of the National Socialist Party along, even though the National Socialist Party simply just wanted to make Germany great. What do you mean? What the fuck? It's all bad, okay? The entire fundamental plank of this institution is bad. What the fuck do you mean J. Edgar Hoover dragged the rest of the FBI along? Like, they were all like super woke at the time. They were all, the FBI was like, sir, Mr. Hoover, sir, we got to tell you, like, this whole attacking MLK stuff is really bad. Why? Well, I watched on TV cops beating the shit out of peaceful protesters, and I grew a conscience, and I decided maybe the segregation stuff isn't fucking sick, you know? Sir, please don't. Sir, please don't make us do this. Is that what happened in the FBI, according to this assessment of history? Was there anything else going on with the FBI except for this? Yeah, sir. Yeah, after using water cannons and seeking dogs on black people, I've decided, when I watched it on TV, it looked bad. It was kind of a bad look. And maybe black people and their children should be able to go to schools with white people. And they should be able to drink from the same water fountain. They do, after all, have the moral high ground. That's what I said as an FBI agent. Once again, a liberal is seemingly focusing on perceived hypocrisy as the greater evil more than being racist as fuck. Yeah.
Agreeing with him meant being out on the streets. The agency would produce what he wanted to hear, or there would be consequences. So when I read these reports from agents who go out with the mandate to collect evidence that will knock Martin Luther King off of his pedestal, I have kind of a hard time trusting.
Bro, this dude literally is like, well, I read through the documents, okay, at the International Criminal Court. And a lot of these guys, these prison guards, they're just prison guards. They think that they are jailing bad people, right? And they were saying that they are just following orders. So should they be executed? It says it right here. They're just following orders. I don't know. I mean, it's just like it seems like the guys didn't really, you know, seems like the guys they didn't really have their heart in it, that they were just following orders. I'm reading, yeah, the papers. It says right here, Nuremberg trials. Okay, I'm reading quotes here. And it seems like they were just brought along by this one singular bad guy by the name of Adolf Hitler? There's some interdepartment drama going on. CIA guys talking mad shit about FBI. Not really. He's not even. If he was a real CIA guy, this is how you know he's not CIA. If he was a real CIA guy, he'd be fucking ripping the FBI a new asshole.
How they interpret it, especially when I'm not looking at the primary source. I'm looking at agents' interpretation of audio recordings. These aren't transcripts. These are summaries. They're not visual. They're audio. And to me, they're tainted.
Dude, that's crazy. He's like, bro, I need to see his stroke game myself. In order to make a correct assessment, I need to see the tapes. Investigate the tapes. I need to know the MLK stroke game. Tainted with racist bias. We need the video. We need the video proof, okay? That way we can know if they were racistly interpreting it or not.
With deep racist bias. As someone who seeks truth and looks for evidence, that's a problem. Now, in 2027, all of the tapes will be released. And at that point, we will have the opportunity to listen to those tapes and assess whether or not they change in any way our legacy and our view of Martin Luther King as an individual. But for now,
bro, what difference does it make if he is laying absolute pipe or not? What the fuck? What do you mean? Why would that change your view in any way? What the fuck are you saying? Like, it is entirely irrelevant. He wasn't like, I have a dream that I can lay pipe, or sorry, he didn't say, I have a dream that I cannot have sex with anybody. Okay? No sex for me, please. That's not what he said. That wasn't his dream. Who gives a fuck? There's no way. He's like, yeah, maybe we'll see that he was cheating on his wife. And this will tarnish our view of him. Okay, maybe you. I don't give a fuck. This is the same fucking like dumb fuck Frederick Douglass bullshit. Okay, the dumb fucks that are like, Frederick Douglass like left his black wife. It's like, who cares, man? What do you mean? What the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? Like, yeah, I found out MLK cheated on his wife potentially as a reverend, and now I think segregation wasn't so bad after all. Yeah, if all of your conversation hinges on the aesthetics of like MLK having the moral high ground, okay, then yeah, potentially this might tarnish your opinion of him. And also, it's not even moral high ground due to like his advocacy, due to what the situation was and what he wanted changed, but the moral high ground simply because he was a non-violent protester, only because he advocated for non-violence, by the way, and nothing else. Oh. You don't understand. MLK has his word, and he would forever give up sex for desegregation. This would change everything. Yeah. A TikToker came up to MLK at the time and said to him, desegregation or desegregation or having sex all the time. And he said, desegregation, of course. I have a dream. And then now he's going back on that word, it seems like. He didn't have the both answer. Yeah, he doubled it and gave it to the next person.
this is not conclusive evidence for me of anything other than the abuse of power at the FBI.
What's wrong with nonviolent protest though? Did I say there was something wrong with it? What the fuck? That's what your assessment is out of everything I have said? You just chose the one thing I haven't said? Like, what's going on here?
So it's 1964. The FBI has been spying on King's every move. They have all these reports of his adulterous behavior. And this is when Hoover's nightmare comes true. Martin Luther King Jr. is selected to receive the Nobel Peace Prize, the ultimate moral high ground. Hoover writes a letter to Sullivan saying, now is the time to act.
The ultimate moral high ground. I'm losing my fucking mind, bro. Oh my God. This whole, the moral high ground thing is killing me, dude. It's actually killing me. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. This is just so childish. Like, we already described that for, like, Johnny Harris is looking at the 60s with today's glasses. Ain't nobody thought he had the moral high ground, man. Like, what do you mean? Absolutely zero people were like, man, you know, this MLK guy, he's defeated us with the moral high ground.
Act to expose him. And it's just a couple days later when the FBI sends that package to King's house in Atlanta with the tapes filled with sexual blackmail and a letter insinuating that it was time for King to end his own life in the next 34 days. We know for certain that this letter came from the FBI. It's like not speculation. A copy of the letter was found in Sullivan's files, though he claims that it was planted there. But what we don't know is exactly what was on those tapes. The tapes were also sent to the media, who didn't end up publishing them. But they also didn't expose the fact that the FBI was spying on Martin Luther King. It was a different media environment back then. But what we do know is that Hoover's plan to end King by gathering all this blackmail and sending it to his house didn't work. King was distraught. It was his wife who opened the package, heard the tapes. But King didn't stop. He was not knocked off his pedestal. King continues to Oslo. He receives his prize. Suddenly, he's Person of the Year on the front of magazines, and he continues to lead a variety of social justice causes. His list.
It's so funny that like almost all of this could not shake the unflinching, unyielding white supremacist feelings that many people held on to. Okay?
The list of enemies continues to grow, especially as he joins the chorus of anti-Vietnam War protesters.
And we have been wrong from the beginning of our adventure in Vietnam. We have been detrimental to the life of the Vietnamese people.
There is something about a war like this that makes people insensitive. It dulls the conscience. It strengthens the forces of reaction, and it brings into being bitterness and hatred and violence.
His movement expands into representing poor and underserved people of all races. He plans to lead another march on Washington, this one bigger than the last. About a month before this next big march on Washington was to happen, King was in Memphis, Tennessee, supporting the strike of mostly black trash collectors, protesting the lack of safety standards and their low pay. And that night, Martin Luther King gave his last speech.
We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now.
Yeah, anti-Vietnam War was another famously popular view back then, with the moral high ground. Yeah. The New York Times editorial board literally wrote a piece being like, you should stay on your own lane. You're disparaging your movement by talking about this whole like anti-Vietnam War nonsense. Another pivotal achievement for liberalism in the shining beacon of democracy, the United States of America. From the paper of record, the Gray Lady, the New York Times, the editorial board writing an article. The editorial board writing an article specifically calling out Martin Luther King to be like, hey, worry about your own shit. We were kind of fine with you talking about black people, but like now you're talking about this like anti-Vietnam war shit, but like we fucking kind of like that. So why don't you, worry about the civil rights stuff?
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
That night, he returned to his hotel, staying in a room that he stayed in so often that it was actually named after him.
The fuck's going on with the audio?
And at 6:01 p.m. on April 4th, 1968, while he was standing out here on this balcony, a single shot rang out, hitting King in the jaw. He was rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead an hour later.
The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, 39 years old and a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and the leader of the nonviolent civil rights movement in the United States, was assassinated in Memphis tonight. A sniper's bullet cut down Dr. King as he stood on a hotel balcony in Memphis. Within an hour, Dr. King was dead. That happened at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The nation was shocked.
By the way, MLK's assassination conspiracy explained 26 minutes, and we have only now talked about the assassination. He didn't explain shit.
The FBI launched an investigation, which led them to this man, James Earl Ray, a 40-year-old fugitive who had escaped from a Missouri prison in a bread truck a year earlier. Ray had rented a room across the street from King's Motel earlier that day. Ray allegedly aimed and shot his rifle from this bathroom window. Shortly after the shooting, Ray fled to Canada, then England, then Portugal, and back to England. His end goal was a country in southern Africa called Rhodesia, which is modern-day Zimbabwe. But he was apprehended at the airport in England and sent back to the United States, where he was arrested.
He said that Ray was carrying 2 Canadian passports and a fully loaded pistol when he landed at London from Lisbon.
He immediately pleaded guilty.
That's crazy. Back then, you could just have a fully loaded pistol on your hip on a fucking airplane, you know? Back when America truly was free. That's what happens with DEI initiatives, folks. You know, DEI, like letting black people drink from the same water fountain as white people, and now you can't even bring a fucking pistol. Now a white man can't even bring a goddamn pistol on board with on the plane with him. Crazy.
Presumably to avoid the risk of the electric chair. And then he was sentenced to 99 years in prison. 3 days later, Ray went back on it, saying that actually, no, he didn't kill MLK, claiming that he was set up, that he was a part of a larger conspiracy to kill King. Those close to King didn't accept the official explanation that Ray was the lone gunman who did this. Perhaps they were all too familiar with the horrifying tactics used by the United States government to spy on, intimidate, discredit, and threaten Martin Luther King. Over the course...
Gee, I wonder how the escaped convict got a hold of 2 Canadian passports all on his lonesome with zero help from the feds. Dude, how dare you? This guy was a big-time Rhodesia fan, okay? He knew all about Rhodesia and how to get there. After all, I mean, he was quite industrious, right? He was able to escape on a bread truck.
course of reporting this story, we opened up a lot of rabbit holes when it came to the conspiracy theories surrounding this assassination. We wanted to really confront them and try to understand what evidence exists and what evidence doesn't, and what is valid and what's not. The lack of faith in the FBI and scrutiny into this case has revealed some pretty significant holes in the explanation, some unexplained things, fishy circumstances, destroyed evidence, timelines that don't add up, witnesses that contradict the real story. A lot of things that make it hard to accept that a 40-year-old fugitive could pull off a sophisticated assassination in one shot and escape through 3 countries. But the investigations done since then have concluded that it was Ray who fired the shot. This includes the House Select Committee, a congressional investigation.
Don't worry, guys. The FBI investigated itself and found that, no, this guy wasn't connected. I mean, this is like a genuinely interesting story. And the fact that he spent like only the last 6 minutes or so talking about the actual conspiracies behind the assassination while using like very little to even, like, he's not even doing a good job of like disparaging the conspiracy. He's like, oh yeah, well, they found that there was no wrongdoing. Okay, come on.
That concluded that Ray did it, though they say it was likely a conspiracy, that there were other people involved, funders, though they say it wasn't the government. The King family continued to sue and search for answers. Then in the 90s, this man comes forward and says that he was a part of it, that he was given money to hire someone to kill King. The King family took him to court under a wrongful death suit. It was a civil case, so there wasn't any like jail time. The jury concluded that the assassination was a conspiracy that included others, including government agencies. But to be clear, this lawsuit from the 90s with this guy named Jowers was not a legitimate piece of proof for this. It didn't include a real defense, and it didn't include any consequences. There was a symbolic $100 payment to the King family. But what it did is shine a light again on the fact that a lot of people aren't satisfied with the official story of who killed Martin Luther King. The fact is that even after all of these lawsuits and investigations and a mock trial that was like live on TV, there is no conclusive evidence that ties the FBI or any other government agency to the assassination of Martin Luther King. And I'm saying that as somebody who feels like it wouldn't actually be outlandish that the FBI did this. After all, the next year they showed.
Wait, what do you mean? Why wouldn't they? Why is it not outlandish? I thought you said J. Edgar Hoover just kind of like guided everybody along, played him like a fiddle to do racism when they were personally like, oh, we hate doing racism at the FBI. Except for this instance that he's about to talk about.
That they were willing to assassinate black men who were subversive in their eyes.
But, you know, he might have been a communist, though, so.
We know that there were threats on King's life that they did not share with him. We know that they didn't insist on protecting him the way that it is their obligation to do so. One of the only reasons to have an organization like that is to protect people who are subject to secretive threats and conspiratorial action. They didn't.
Yeah, no, totally. The FBI famously very good at dealing with death threats. They don't just like give you a fucking phone call and are like, hey, you have death threats, by the way, if at all. And then maybe in a hypothetical scenario, you're like, what do you mean? Okay, what are you going to do about it? And they're like, oh, nothing. Yeah, that's the goal of the FBI for sure, is to protect American citizens from death threats.
Do that.
After looking into all of this, really grappling with it, understanding the reality of the FBI at this time, I think the real reason why people think that the government killed Martin Luther King is because, in a sense, they did. What I've shown you today, all of these FBI transcripts and evidence from the 60s, is rock solid proof of one thing. J. Edgar Hoover and his bureau of powerful, unelected men wore their badges of justice and then used their power to threaten the life of Martin Luther King. They did so the moment they saw a black man getting too powerful and threatening the power that they relied on to keep themselves on top, and they couldn't stand it. Hoover and his FBI used the sacred levers of justice given to him by the American people to carry out a personal racist vendetta against King and his movement. A movement that used morality and words and ideas and nonviolence to try to level the playing field for the oppressed class in this country. But to Hoover, all he could see in this was a black man that was threatening his power.
You know, I would say that the FBI certainly did, help to set the atmosphere around King, that he was someone who was dangerous and who was trying to destroy the country, to help solidify the way public opinion began to turn against him.
Not only did that congressional report find that racism was rife at the FBI, but they also note that the FBI's campaign against Martin Luther King didn't end after he died. When Congress was discussing whether or not to make MLK's birthday a national holiday, the FBI sent people over to lobby the Congress to vote against it.
Yeah. American liberals were like super on board with MLK's message, famously. Please don't look into it. Guys, please don't look into it, okay? Just take my word for it. Everyone in America was like, man, this MLK guy, I didn't want to listen to him at first, but then I saw like a bunch of black people being portrayed as burning cities down on television, and I definitely was on board after that. Trust me. That's what the American liberals were saying at that point.
And luckily, they failed. Today, here in our nation's capital, between Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln, King has been resurrected in granite, 30 feet tall, a stone of hope that is breaking through a mountain of despair. And yet, right down the road, not too far away, is the headquarters of the FBI, a building named after J. Edgar Hoover, commemorating a man who professionalized the Bureau during the Cold War, who fought against organized crime, but who was also the architect of racist corruption and governmental overreach, not just against King, but also against many American people. He implemented widespread domestic spying, including on politicians and presidents. He had dirt on them, the power to blackmail, the power to control. He hijacked the most powerful tools of justice to attack the movement that...
No, he didn't. He did not hijack the most... Bro, what the fuck? If he hijacked it, why is he on the fucking building as a name? Why is his name on the building if he hijacked it? Do you think the things that you're seeing here in this YouTube video, the FBI is not aware of? Bro, what the fuck are you saying? He didn't hijack it. That was what it was designed to do. He was very good at it. Like, what if... Dude, this is literally being like... Adolf Hitler was the singular only Nazi. Nobody else. No other Nazis, okay? Just like they were all being led astray. He hijacked the tools of the National Socialist movement, okay? It doesn't make any sense.
Changed the world. And yet, here his building sits. It's perhaps the perfect symbol of how comfortable we are with maintaining old, broken systems.
Bro, you literally made a video about why those old, broken systems are like the fault of an individual. What is happening? This end sequence kind of contradicts the entire video.
that keep certain people powerful, how we let those structures remain in our capital, in our streets, in our politics, in our memories, and in our minds.
I say tonight to white America.
Yeah, he hijacked it in a way that everyone liked and approved of, and he was praised for, and that's why he's on. I mean, he hijacked it by basically creating it in a way that everybody approved of, and so much so that they celebrate him by putting his name on the side of the building. But let's not make any inferences off of that. After all, it was one bad guy. The FBI was one bad apple, actually.
There will be no rest. There will be no tranquility in this nation until the Negro has his freedom.
Wait, what did he say?
Remain in our capital, in our streets, in our politics, in our memories, and in our minds.
I say tonight to white America, there will be no rest. There will be no tranquility in this nation until the Negro has his freedom.
Man, this video was awesome. What a fucking bad video. Shocking. Actually shockingly bad. Actually, surprisingly. Even for Johnny, it's like, I don't know. Maybe, I mean, I'm sure the reception is phenomenal. Would really like more videos about Hoover. He's probably the closest thing to a tyrant the USA has ever had, and we've never taught about the way he tried to ruin the lives of perceived enemies against the best interests of Americans. Man probably deserves his own video. The really scary thing is all those entities are still at work today with even more technical tools and weapons. Hideo Kojima taught me that J. Edgar Hoover was a well-known racist. Just thinking they wrote that letter tells you how disgusting the FBI and CIA is. All in all, this was an incredibly tragic loss, especially for the King family, but also for America. Well done, Johnny and the team, for presenting this in such a beautiful yet respectful way. Sometimes when I watch stuff like this, you explained MLK change and message better than most high schools in America. Yeah, sometimes I watch stuff like this and I think to myself, like, am I wrong? Like, I don't get it. Like, what do these people see in a video like this? Because this was 26 minutes of straight up, like, the exact same thing you hear in high school, I assume, right? I didn't go to high school here. But I feel like this is precisely how they teach it. Like MLK, only famous for being, only having the moral high ground. That's what it was. And they hated that he had the moral high ground. It's like, no, man, they hated that he was advocating for desegregation. He had the moral high ground because he was advocating for desegregation, which at the time didn't mean anything because the overarching sentiment from the population was, fuck that, actually. We don't want it. Which is ironic because that still is the sentiment. People get bullied and ridiculed and sometimes even maybe quote unquote assassinated, who knows, allegedly, when they do actually shake up the system in this way. Because as MLK, you're misinterpreting in a weird way the video. Okay, there are people in this chat who also see it that way. There was more effective recuperation of fascist U.S. systems in this video than there was in high school. Like, what do you mean by this? Like, I'm not misinterpreting what he said. Like, one of the fundamental flaws that I have with this video, one of the fundamental flaws that I have with this video is that there was no space in it for the top of the hour ad break, which comes at the top of every hour, right? I mean, that's the thing. And if you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe. You think it's a mid-video. Why do you think it's a mid-video then? If I'm fundamentally misinterpreting what he's saying, I really want to know why you think it's a mid-video. They didn't show MLK stroke game. Is that why it's a mid-video? Like, what's happening? What is the real reason why it's a mid-video if you disagree with me and you think I'm fundamentally misinterpreting what his main point was?